You'd think knowing the future, being able to see what's coming, would give you control. Ciri certainly had, once upon a time. If only I'd known not to throw the ball near the vase. If only I'd known this boy would never love me back. Then Ciri was granted the power to see the future, and she learned she'd be wrong. There are just some things one would have preferred not to know. Ciri woke to warmth, not light. She hadn't seen light in weeks. But warmth against her left side, the give of the mattress where someone sat, and the clean soap smell that meant Fergus. Her hand moved across the quilt until it found his. Their fingers laced together without thought. 3 months married, and his touch still steadied her. Fergus squeezed her hand gently. He said, "You're awake. Good. I was starting to worry." Ciri turned her face toward his voice. She whispered, "You're always worrying." "Someone has to," Fergus said. His thumb traced circles against her palm. He continued, "Cordelia brought soup. Your stepmother stayed up half the night making it. She wants you to eat." Ciri's throat tightened. Ariadne, who'd married her father when Ciri was 15, who'd held her when Oz got sick, who'd held her again when he died, who stayed beside her every single day after the same illness came for Ciri, after the fevers took her sight. And Fergus, who'd proposed anyway, who'd married her knowing she might not live long enough to give him children or grow old with him or even see his face again. She didn't have words for what she felt. Gratitude didn't cover it. Love wasn't big enough. Ciri said, "I don't deserve you." Fergus leaned closer. His breath was warm against her temple when he said, "You have me anyway." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Light bloomed behind her closed eyes. Ciri gasped. Color. Real color. Gold and amber and the warm honey shade of afternoon sun through tall windows. She could see the windows. She could see the light pooling on floorboards, the shadow of furniture, the edge of a desk. But she was in bed, wasn't she? She was in bed with Fergus holding her hand. Why could she see a desk? Fergus stood near it. His jacket was gone. His shirt hung open. She tried to call to him, but her mouth wouldn't work. Her body wouldn't respond. She was there, but not there. Present, but unable to move or speak or make him look at her. Cordelia walked into view, Ciri's stepsister, in the library. Why was Cordelia in the library with Fergus? Cordelia wore a dressing gown, silk, the kind she wore in the mornings before she dressed for the day. It slipped off her shoulders as she moved toward Fergus. Then it fell to the floor entirely. Ciri tried to turn away, but she had no body to turn. She could only watch as Cordelia pressed herself against Fergus's chest, as his hands came up to grip her bare waist, as Cordelia's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt. Why wasn't he stopping her? Ciri tried to speak, tried to shout. Nothing came out. They couldn't hear her. They didn't know she was there. Fergus pulled Cordelia closer. His mouth found her neck. Cordelia tilted her head back, and her lips parted, and she made a sound Ciri had never heard her make before. Soft and breathless and wanting. Fergus walked backward until he reached the chair near the desk. He sat. Cordelia climbed into his lap, straddling him, completely bare, and Ciri understood suddenly what was about to happen, but she couldn't look away, couldn't close her eyes, couldn't do anything but watch as Cordelia moved against him, and Fergus groaned deep in his throat. His hands slid up Cordelia's back, down again, gripping, pulling. His hips lifted to meet hers. Cordelia gasped his name. Fergus said, "Cordelia, oh, Cordelia." Ciri had never heard her name in his mouth like that. Desperate. Raw. Like he'd been starving and finally found food. Cordelia laughed breathlessly. She said, "Quiet, love. She might hear." Fergus pulled her down harder and said, "I don't care. I need you. I need..." The library vanished. Ciri was in her bed again, in darkness, her hand still clasped in Fergus's, rain still pattering against the window. But her heart was slamming against her ribs and her breath came in short gasps, and she couldn't stop seeing Cordelia's bare skin and Fergus's hands and the way his face had looked. The way he'd said her sister's name. Ciri jerked her hand free. Fergus asked, "Ciri, what's wrong?" She scrambled backward against the headboard, her nightdress twisted around her legs. She couldn't get enough air. Fergus said, "You're shaking. Did you have a nightmare?" "A nightmare." Yes, that's what it must have been. A fever dream, the illness making her see impossible things. But she'd felt the warmth of that room, smelled the beeswax candles, heard every breath and gasp and word. Siri managed, I don't know, I saw... She stopped. What had she seen? How could she have seen anything when she was blind? Fergus touched her shoulder. The image flashed again behind her eyes, his hands on Cordelia's waist, Cordelia's head thrown back. Siri flinched away from his touch. Fergus pulled back immediately and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. Siri pressed her hands against her face, against her useless eyes. Her voice came out thin when she said, I need you to go. What? Fergus asked. Please, I need to be alone right now. Silence stretched between them. Then Fergus said quietly, Of course, I'll come back later. The mattress shifted. His footsteps crossed the floor. The door opened and closed. Siri sat in the darkness. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Not real. It couldn't be real. Fergus loved her. He'd married her. He held her hand every morning and kissed her forehead and told her she was his wife and that was all she needed to be. But her mind kept returning to the way he'd said Cordelia's name. The desperation in it. The need. He'd never said Siri's name like that. She pressed her palms harder against her eyes, counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. She was being foolish, unkind. He'd been nothing but patient with her, and she'd sent him away because of a dream. She had to apologize. Siri swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her bare feet found the floor. She stood slowly, one hand braced against the bedpost until her balance steadied. She knew this room by touch now, 15 paces to the door. She'd counted them so many times since the blindness took hold. Her fingers trailed along the writing desk, then the wardrobe, then found the door handle. The hallway was cooler. She kept her left palm flat against the wall as she walked, counting steps, past her room, past the guest chambers, toward the main staircase. Voices drifted up from somewhere below. Fergus's voice, and Cordelia's. Siri stopped at the top of the stairs. Her hand found the banister. Fergus said, Siri's acting strange. What if she knows? Cordelia answered, How would she know? She's human, Fergus. She can't smell how our scents mix. She can't feel the mate bond between us pulse. The words took a moment to settle, to make sense. Mate bond. Siri knew what that meant. Wolf shifters had one true mate, one destined partner. The bond was unbreakable, sacred. Fergus and Cordelia had a mate bond. A small sound came from below, soft and wet. Then Cordelia made that breathless noise again. The same one from the library in Siri's dream. Except it hadn't been a dream. Fergus groaned and said, I need you, Cordy. I need to touch you, need to have you. I can't keep pretending. Cordelia made another sound, higher, needier. She said, Soon, my love, soon. Mother said we'd only have to wait a little bit longer. Only a little bit longer. Fergus's voice came out rough when he asked, How much longer? How much longer until this slow-acting poison finally claims Siri's life so we can finally be together? Siri's hand slipped off the banister. Poison, Cordelia said breathlessly between kissing sounds. Mother assures me she'll be out of the way soon. You'll have me, and we'll have Siri's fortune, and the future will be ours. More wet sounds, fabric rustling. Siri found the servants' stairs, started down. Her bare feet slipped on the narrow wooden steps. She caught herself on the railing. The kitchen was empty and cold. She felt her way across it. Her hands found the door. She fumbled with the latch until it gave. Siri walked into the rain, into the night, away from her home. Everyone thinks they want to know the future, until they see something they wish they hadn't. Siri was learning that the hard way, but as she ran blind through the rain with nowhere to go and no one to trust, she didn't know that her future had already been decided. By fate, by prophecy, by a carriage waiting in the dark. Chapter 1. The forest floor was uneven beneath her bare feet. Siri stumbled over roots she couldn't see, her hands stretched out in front of her, grasping at air that gave her nothing. She had to get away from the estate, from Ariadne. From Cordelia and Fergus and the poison they'd been feeding her for months. To think they'd been giving her poison for months when she thought... She swallows down a scream. She thought they'd loved her. When this beautiful Ariadne had married her father, when she had hugged and cared for and protected Ciri, her adoptive daughter, even after his death. Everyone praised her kindness, her devotion. What a blessing poor Ciri had such a loving stepmother. What a fool Ciri had been. Her stepmother, her beloved sister, and the man she loved, they'd all wanted her dead. The rain had stopped, but everything was wet. Cold mud squelching between her toes and her nightdress clinging to her skin like a second layer of ice. She didn't know where she was going or how far she'd run, and so she let herself wonder for the first time what she was actually supposed to do now. She was blind, weak from months of poison, alone in a forest in the middle of the night with no money and no shoes and nowhere to go. If they found her, they'd kill her and make it look like the illness had finally won. Suddenly light bloomed behind Ciri's eyes. Not again, she thought. Not another vision. She didn't want to see anything else terrible. But the colors came anyway, sharp and bright and impossible to stop. A road stretching out under moonlight. The sound of horses' hooves and carriage wheels growing louder, closer. A carriage slowing to a stop. And Ciri climbing in it. The vision faded as quickly as it had come. Ciri stayed on her knees in the mud, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. A carriage. Of all the things she might have seen, her mind had conjured up a carriage. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it, because yes, a carriage would be wonderfully convenient right about now, but visions didn't work that way. Except the vision with Fergus and Cordelia had felt exactly this real, and that one had been true. What if this one was too? Ciri pushed herself to her feet and stood very still, listening with every part of herself that still worked. There. Faint, but growing steadily louder, the sound of horses moving at a steady trot, the creak and rattle of wheels on a road, which meant she'd somehow made it through the forest to the other side. She turned toward the sound and started walking faster, her feet slipping on mud before they hit something harder and more even. The road. The sound of the carriage grew louder, close enough that if she didn't move, it would pass her by entirely. Ciri threw herself forward. "Are you crazy?" someone shouted, an old man's voice sharp with alarm. The driver, she thought distantly. Horses whinnied in protest, and the carriage lurched to a stop with the screech of brakes and the stamp of hooves on stone. A second voice spoke, calmer and deeper than the first. "What's going on?" the other man asked. "A crazy girl," the old driver stammered. "A crazy girl threw herself under the carriage's wheels. The carriage door opened, interrupting him. Footsteps on stone, measured and unhurried, coming toward her. Ciri stayed where she was until hand touched her arm, warm even through the wet fabric of her nightdress. "Are you all right?" the second man asked. She couldn't see him, but she could sense him somehow, solid and real and present in a way that made her want to collapse against him and beg for help. But what if he refused? She needed to make sure he took her with him, and begging wouldn't do that. So instead, she lifted her chin. "You nearly killed me," she announced. Silence stretched between them for a long moment. "You ran in front of my carriage," the man observed slowly. Ciri pushed herself up to sitting. "Nevertheless, the trauma has been considerable," she insisted. "You must compensate me." Another pause, longer this time. "Let me get you to a doctor," he offered, his voice careful in a way that suggested he was trying very hard not to laugh. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. "All right," she agreed quickly before he could change his mind. That would be acceptable. The man's hand stayed on her arm as he helped her stand, his grip firm enough to support her weight when she swayed. He studied her without comment. "Can you walk?" he asked. Ciri nodded and took a step forward to prove it. Her knee buckled immediately. His other hand came up to catch her before she fell. "You can't see," he observed. Ciri's throat tightened. "No," she whispered. He didn't say anything else, didn't ask questions or make sympathetic noises, or treat her like she was made of glass. He just guided her toward the carriage with patient care. She sat in the darkness and tried to slow her breathing, tried to think past the exhaustion that made her bones feel like lead. "What happened?" the man asked, sitting across from her. Siri flinched. She'd almost forgotten he was there. "I don't know what you mean," she lied. "You're terrified," the man stated. Siri stiffened. How could he possibly know? "I'm fine," she protested. "I can smell your fear," he explained, as if reading the question she hadn't asked. Siri's breath caught in her throat. A shifter. That meant he was a shifter. She should have known from the way he moved, too smooth and too controlled to be entirely human. Her stepmother was a shifter. Cordelia was a shifter. Fergus was a shifter. And they'd betrayed her. She'd once thought wolves were beautiful, had listened to her sister's excited chatter about pack bonds and moon runs, and thought it all sounded wonderful and mysterious. Until tonight, twisted every memory into something dangerous, something savage, something that wanted her dead. The man must have sensed her tension because his voice gentled. "I won't hurt you," he promised, almost apologetic. Siri didn't answer. She didn't know if she believed him. "My name is Roman," he offered. Siri crossed her arms over her chest. "Your name is Roman, and you're a shifter?" She repeated. "Really? Like the Alpha King himself? You expect me to believe that?" "And why wouldn't you?" the man asked, a hint of laughter in his voice. "Why would I?" Siri countered flatly. He didn't answer with words. Instead, she heard fabric rustling, the shift of movement, and then something warm and heavy settled over her shoulders. A cloak, she realized. "You're shivering," Roman observed. The warmth sank into her skin immediately. Siri pulled the cloak tighter around herself before she could stop herself. "I'm in danger," she admitted quietly, barely louder than a whisper. "I know," Roman acknowledged. "How?" Siri asked. "The way you ran into the road like you'd rather die than go back to wherever you came from." The shifter replied, his voice matter of fact. Siri's hands twisted in the fabric of the cloak. "They'll look for me," she warned. "When they realize I'm gone, then I'll protect you," Roman vowed simply. Siri turned her face toward his voice. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need help," Roman answered. It was too simple, too easy, too good to be true. People didn't just help strangers for no reason. But Siri was too exhausted to argue. "What is your name?" she heard him ask. Her eyes closed. Her body slumped against the cushioned seat, exhaustion pulling her down like a weight. "Siri," she whispered. Roman said something else, but his voice was far away now, fading into the distance as sleep reached up to claim her. Chapter 2. The carriage rocked gently beneath her, a rhythmic sway that reminded Siri of being rocked to sleep as a child. She'd pulled Roman's cloak tighter around herself without meaning to, burrowing into the warmth and the unfamiliar comfort of feeling safe. Her eyes were already closed, not that it mattered when she couldn't see anyway, and the darkness behind them felt less frightening now than it had in weeks. Then candlelight filled her vision. Siri's awareness snapped into focus with jarring suddenness. Her bedroom at the estate materialized around her, the one with the tall windows that overlooked the gardens. The one she hadn't seen in weeks. This was either a dream or another vision. Fergus stood beside her bed, his posture rigid and formal. Ariadne and Cordelia flanked the other side, their faces painted with concern that looked almost genuine in the warm glow of the candles. And Siri was looking down at the scene as if she floated near the ceiling, like a ghost watching her own life unfold below. The girl on the bed, herself, but not herself, looked terrible. Pale as wax, her skin stretched tight over the bones of her face until she resembled a corpse more than a living person. Fergus bent closer. He placed a thick sheaf of parchment on her chest, the pages crackling with official seals and legal language. He dipped a pen into the inkwell on the bedside table with careful precision. "Go on, betrothed," Fergus murmured. "Sign the documents. It's not much longer now." "Does it really matter?" Cordelia's voice cut in from the other side. "She can barely hold the pen. Look at her." "Mind your tongue," Ariadne hissed. "We need her signature legible enough that no one questions it." Fergus sighed, the sound heavy with theatrical weariness. "She went faster than I expected," he muttered. "But I suppose humans are fragile things, aren't they? With Wolf to help them heal." "Father always said humans were weaker," Cordelia agreed, "and lesser." Siri gasped when Fergus and Ariadne nodded at that. Beneath them. They thought she was beneath them because she was human. because to them, she was weak, inferior. Ariadne leaned in from her side of the bed, pressing a delicate handkerchief to her mouth as if overcome with emotion. "I'm so sorry it has to be this way," she managed, her voice breaking on the last word. "If only your father hadn't left everything to you." This is what would have happened if Ciri hadn't escaped, she realized. This was her future, if Ariadne and the others ever got her hands on her again. She knew it. Swirls of black filled Ciri's mind, thick and suffocating. The room spun. She grew dizzy, even though she had no body to feel dizzy with, and then the darkness cleared and she was somewhere else entirely. A cemetery. Gray stone markers jutted up from manicured grass under a sky that threatened rain. Fergus stood between Ariadne and Cordelia, all three of them dressed in mourning black that somehow looked celebratory on them. Fergus worked the cork free from a bottle of wine with a practiced twist. Cordelia held out 3 glasses. Crystal, Ciri noticed. They raised their glasses over a freshly turned grave. Her grave, Ciri realized with a lurch. Her name was carved into the headstone in elegant script. "To new beginnings," Ariadne declared, her voice bright with triumph. Fergus clinked his glass against hers. "To finally being together," he added, pulling Cordelia close with his free arm. "And to never having to pretend a human was my equal again." Cordelia giggles. "Mother promised we'd only have to wait a little longer," she cooed. "And she was right. She's always right." A crow landed on top of the stone with a flutter of wings. It cocked its head and fixed one black eye on her, then opened its beak and cawed, the sound echoing through the empty cemetery like laughter. Ciri jerked awake with a gasp that felt like it tore something in her chest. No more doubt, they had been planning to get rid of her. They had been actively doing so, day by day, dose by dose, and then they were going to celebrate over her grave. "Easy," a voice said from very close by. Ciri cried out and swung her arm toward the sound without thinking. Her elbow connected with something solid and unforgiving. Muscle, she realized. A person. A grunt of pain reached her ears. Then fingers curled carefully around her elbow a moment later, steadying rather than restraining. "Did I hurt you?" Roman asked, his voice tight with concern that seemed absurd given that she'd just struck him. Ciri swallowed hard. He was a shifter too. He'd said so himself. He could smell her fear. And now she knew what that meant. What shifters really thought of humans like her. "I apologize," she managed, her voice shakier than she would have liked. "I didn't mean to hit you." Roman's fingers tightened around her elbow. Then her arm was lifted, angled slightly, moved with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the strength she could feel in his grip. "What are you doing?" Ciri asked, trying to pull back. "I apologize," Roman murmured, finally releasing her arm. "I was just checking." Ciri frowned, but chose not to comment on his confusing behavior. "How long was I asleep?" she asked instead. "It's almost midnight," Roman answered. "You're safe, I promise." Ciri wanted to ask how she could possibly be sure of that, how anyone could make such a promise when shifters could smell fear and track prey and tear people apart with their bare hands. When shifters saw humans as weak, as inferior, as things to be discarded. "I won't let anything happen to you," Roman repeated quietly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with sincerity that Ciri didn't know what to do with. Her lips parted, a question forming, but before she could speak, the carriage rolled to a halt with a final jolt that sent her swaying on the seat. They'd arrived. Wherever they were going, they'd arrived. Chapter 3. Roman's hand stayed at her elbow as he helped her down from the carriage, and Ciri accepted it because she had to, because the alternative was stumbling blind in a place she didn't know, but she remained acutely aware of every point of contact between them. Sound washed over her in waves, movement everywhere, fabric rustling, footsteps approaching and retreating, voices murmuring in that particular register people used when they were trying to be discreet, but couldn't quite manage silence. Then the voices shifted, grew sharper with something that might have been alarm or surprise or both at once. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." The title rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. She heard it repeated, first by one voice, then another, spreading through the assembled crowd in a pattern of deference that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Your Majesty." The man who'd picked her up off the road, who'd given her his cloak and promised to protect her, was not a noble, nor even a lord or a high-ranking minister. He was the Alpha King himself. Ciri's jaw clenched. He even told her so, she'd realized. He told her his name. This explained the driver's aborted honorific, the careful way he'd spoken to her, the fact that no one had questioned her presence in his carriage. But it didn't explain why he'd stopped for her at all, why he'd brought her here. What does the Alpha King want from me? She wondered. They passed from open air into enclosed space. She felt the change immediately, warmer, quieter, the sounds softening as stone walls rose around them. Their footsteps echoed differently here, sharper and more defined. A hallway, she thought. Then Roman guided her through another doorway and the acoustics shifted again, smaller, more intimate. A door closed behind them with a solid click. Silence settled over them like a blanket. Ciri could hear her own breathing, too fast and too shallow, and the faint crackle of a fire she hadn't noticed before. Warmth touched her face from the left. A hearth, then. This was a room someone used regularly, not just a receiving chamber for unwanted guests. Roman moved away from her. His footsteps crossed the room, paused, returned. She heard liquid being poured into glass. "Here," he said quietly, closer than she'd expected. "Water. You should drink something." Ciri's fingers found the glass he pressed into her hand. When she'd emptied the glass, Roman took it from her without comment. More footsteps. He was giving her space, she realized. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked bluntly. The silence that followed stretched just a beat too long. "Because you needed a doctor," Roman answered finally, his tone carefully neutral. Ciri shook her head, frustration building in her chest alongside the confusion. "Fine," Ciri snapped. "But why bring me inside your palace? You could have just called upon one to examine me outside and send me on my merry way." "I wouldn't do that," Roman replied, as if that explained everything. "Not when your merry way didn't not seem so merry." "Well, that doesn't make sense," Ciri insisted. "Kings don't just bring random people home. There has to be some reason they thought that—" "You're my mate," Roman interrupted. The words dropped into the space between them like stones into still water. "No," Ciri said flatly. "Mate." She knew what that meant. Everyone knew what that meant. Fated pairs, destined partners, two souls meant to be together for life. The kind of bond that shifters built entire mythologies around. The kind of bond that should never include the likes of a human. Certainly not when the other party was a king. "I felt it the moment you touched me," Roman continued, his voice steady but edged with something that might have been emotion tightly controlled. "In the carriage, when you took my hand, the bond recognized you immediately." "No," Ciri repeated louder this time. She took a step backward and nearly stumbled. "I know this is overwhelming," Roman said, moving slightly as if to steady her, then stopping himself. "I know you weren't expecting this, but—" "You don't know anything." Ciri cut him off, her voice shaking. "You don't know me." She was breathing hard now, her chest rising and falling with the effort of keeping herself together. "I was raised by shifters," Ciri said. "I know how this works. I know what mate bonds mean to your kind. But I'm human. I don't have a wolf. I don't feel whatever it is you claim to feel." She took a breath, forced herself to continue even though every instinct screamed at her to stop talking, to not antagonize the one person who'd shown her any kindness since she'd fled. "My husband—" Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "My husband felt a mate bond with my stepsister while promising to marry me, and somehow that made it acceptable for him to betray me. Because your bonds trump everything, don't they? Your bonds mean the rest of us just have to accept whatever we're given and be grateful for it." "That's not what I'm saying," Roman said quietly. "Then what are you saying?" Ciri demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're telling me I owe you something I never agreed to give." "I'm saying you're not alone," Roman corrected, his voice calm despite the accusations she was hurling at him. "I'm saying whoever hurt you made an enemy of me the moment they touched you." Ciri opened her mouth to argue, to push back against promises that sounded too good to be true because they always were. But something else pushed its way to the front of her mind, something cold and sharp and suddenly, horrifyingly clear. She'd grown up admiring Cordelia's ability to shift, watching with fascination as her stepsister's bones reshaped and fur sprouted, and she became something wild and beautiful. Ciri had begged to hear stories about pack bonds and moon runs and the ancient customs that governed shifter society. She'd been proud when her father married Ariadne, proud that their family proved humans and shifters could be one despite their differences. But they'd never seen it that way, had they? And there was one person who'd known. "We're not like them, Ciri," Oz had whispered, tugging at her sleeve. Her 8-year-old little brother. She'd laughed and told him not to be silly. They were family. It didn't matter that she and Oz were human while Ariadne and Cordelia had wolves. But Oz had shaken his head. "They look at us different," he'd insisted, "like we don't belong." Ciri had dismissed it as a child's imagination. She'd been so sure Oz was wrong. He hadn't been wrong about anything. And then he died. He died from the same illness that had then begun to claim Ciri's life. The same illness that had not been an illness at all. Ciri went very still. "What is it?" Roman asked, his tone shifting to concern. "My brother," Ciri whispered. Her voice didn't sound like her own. "Oz. He got sick last year." She swallowed hard, tasting bile. "But it wasn't illness at all, was it? They were poisoning him. The same poison they've been using on me. They killed him." Her hands shook. "I didn't believe him when he tried to warn me about them. I thought he was being paranoid." Her voice broke. She pressed one hand against her mouth, trying to hold back the sound that wanted to escape. "They killed him," she said again, the words muffled against her palm. When she lowered her hand, her voice had changed, harder, colder, stripped of everything soft or uncertain or afraid. "I want revenge," Ciri said. "I don't want comfort or protection or a mate bond I never asked for. I want to take everything they took from me." She turned her face toward where she thought Roman was standing, her blind eyes fixed on nothing but her attention absolute. "I want to watch them lose the fortune they murdered for. I want them to feel what I felt. And I want them to know at the end that I was the one who destroyed them. So if you want to help me do that. Give me resources. Give me information. Give me whatever I need to tear their lives apart piece by piece until there's nothing left. But don't ask me to be anything other than exactly what I am right now. Someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to take back." The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. When Roman finally spoke, his voice was low and steady and absolutely certain. "Then that's what I'll give you," he said simply. "Resources, information, power, whatever you need to make them pay for what they did. I won't ask for gratitude, and I will stand beside you while you take back everything they stole." He paused, and she heard him move slightly, though he still didn't close the distance between them. "Your enemies are my enemies now," Roman continued. "Anyone who would poison a child and betray someone who trusted them deserves to be destroyed, and I'm very good at destroying people who deserve it." Chapter 4. The guest apartment was larger than Ciri's entire bedroom at the estate. She knew this not by sight, but by the way sound traveled when Roman guided her inside, his footsteps echoing briefly before being swallowed by thick carpets. The air smelled of lavender and beeswax. Clean linen. A room prepared with care. "The bedroom is through the door to your left," Roman said. "The bathing chamber beyond that. There's a sitting area near the windows. Someone will bring food shortly." Ciri nodded, her hand brushing the back of an upholstered chair. Velvet, worn smooth. "The healers will arrive soon," he continued. "They'll assess the poison and determine how to purge it safely." The word assess sent unease tightening through her chest, but she swallowed it down. If she wanted revenge, she needed to survive first. "I understand," she said. Roman paused near the door. "Someone will remain nearby. You're safe here." The door closed softly behind him. A maid came shortly after. She helped Ciri wash, changed her into a clean dress, spoke little. Ciri was grateful for the silence. When the healers arrived, the room filled with the sharp scent of herbs and tinctures. Several voices murmured, discussing her as if she weren't sitting right there. "Systematic poisoning," an older man said. "Extended exposure, neurological involvement." "We'll need a full physical assessment," a woman added briskly. "Remove your dress, please." Ciri's breath caught. The idea of strangers touching her while she sat blind and helpless sent her pulse skidding out of control. "No," she gasped. A pause. "My lady, we cannot properly treat you unless—" I said no. Her voice shook, but it held. "You're not touching me."
"We're trying to help," the healer attempted.
"Get out." Footsteps shifted. Then the door opened again. "What's happening?" Roman asked. "She's refusing examination," the healer said carefully. "Everyone out," Roman said quietly, "except the senior healer." Silence, then retreating footsteps. The door closed. Ciri's breathing was too fast. Her chest hurt. "Ciri," Roman said, "listen to me. You're safe. No one touches you without your permission. Do you understand?" She nodded. "They need to examine you to help," he continued. "But you control the pace. We stop when you say stop." The pressure in her chest eased just a fraction. She stopped. There were no words for the fear lodged under her ribs. "I know," Roman said. Then, steady and unyielding, "You may not want me as your mate, but you are mine. I will not let anyone harm you." Her whole body went rigid. "Please don't say that," she said. "It makes me uncomfortable." "I'm not saying it to claim you," he replied evenly. "I'm saying it so you believe me when I say you are safe." Silence stretched between them. "Will you let the healer examine you?" he asked. "I'll stay, or I'll leave, whatever you choose." Ciri swallowed. "Stay, but I'm warned before every touch, and if I say stop, everything stops." Agreed. The healer, an older woman named Marin, worked slowly, explaining every movement. The examination was controlled, deliberate, exhausting. "The poison remains in your system," Marin said at last. "We can purge it, but it won't be pleasant. Nausea, pain, disorientation." Ciri tightened her jaw. "Give it to me." The tincture was bitter. The heat followed almost immediately, rolling through her stomach. Sweat broke out along her spine. "Breathe," Marin said calmly. Then the world tilted. Color bloomed behind her eyes. Ariadne stood in her private study, lamplight warm against polished wood. Fergus lingered near the door, arms crossed. Cordelia paced. "I'm offering you what you want," Ariadne said smoothly. "Cordelia, all I ask is that you marry my other daughter first." "The human?" Fergus said, distaste clear. "She inherited everything," Ariadne replied, "and the law is quite clear." Cordelia's voice broke. "He's my mate." Ariadne set down her glass. "Unless she dies." Fergus looked up. "How long?" Images fractured, vials, measured drops, forced smiles, her own body fading. A grave waiting. The vision shattered. Ciri gasped, folding forward as nausea ripped through her. Hands caught her shoulders. "Breathe," Roman commanded. "I've got you." She was shaking, speaking without realizing it. "How do you know?" Roman asked quietly. She wiped her mouth. "I see things, visions. They're real. I can't stop them." Roman was silent for a long moment. "Then we use them," he said. "What?" "You can see their plans," he replied. "That means we stay ahead of them." She felt something inside her shift, fear giving way to focus. "They want different things," Roman continued. "That makes them vulnerable." Marin cleared her throat. "The purge will continue for hours. She needs rest." "We'll continue tomorrow," Roman said. "But we will continue." As he turned to leave, Ciri whispered, "Thank you." He paused. "This isn't kindness," he said. "It's justice." Then he was gone. The purge continued, painful, draining. But for the first time since she'd fled the estate, Ciri didn't feel helpless. She felt ready. Chapter 5. Morning came with pale light filtering through windows Ciri couldn't see. She'd slept poorly, the purge leaving her wrung out and hollowed. The knock at her door came mid-morning. "Come in," Ciri called, recognizing Roman's presence before he'd even crossed the threshold. "How are you feeling?" he asked without preamble. "Like I was turned inside out," she admitted. He settled into the chair near the window. "We need to talk about your marriage to Fergus." Ciri's hands tightened in her lap. "What about it?" "As long as it stands, he retains legal rights to your fortune, your lands, your name. Even imprisoned, those rights exist. He paused. The marriage must be annulled before we move against anyone else. Then annul it. Ciri shrugged. I certainly won't complain. Right. Roman cleared his throat. The easiest path to annulment is if the marriage was never consummated. The word hung in the air, clinical and impersonal. Unconsummated marriages can be dissolved more cleanly, with fewer legal challenges. Roman explained. So, was it? Was it consummated? No, she said curtly. I see, Roman said quietly. Something in his voice made Ciri's head turn toward him. I'm glad you're relieved, Ciri said, her tone cooling. Silence stretched. Then Roman spoke again, his voice carrying weight. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable, he said. But I'll be honest. I'm relieved because an unconsummated marriage means you can be freed cleanly. The idea of you being touched by someone actively planning your death, it matters. And I'm glad it didn't happen. Ciri sat very still, processing the careful way he'd framed it. Now what? She asked. Now we move quickly, Roman said. Fergus is the weakest link. He's motivated by desire more than loyalty, which makes him exploitable. And he's been kept apart from Cordelia since you vanished. Kept apart how? Ciri asked. Fergus has been confined to his family's holdings. They haven't seen each other in days. For people bound by a mate bond, that kind of separation is painful. Ciri nodded. Which means Fergus is desperate right now. Exactly. Likely to make mistakes. Roman explained. I want to give him what he thinks he wants. A letter from Cordelia. A promise of a meeting. You'll be posing as her. But we need to be careful. He'll smell immediately that you're not Cordelia if you come too close. So we arrange the meeting to keep you at a distance, and we cover you in her things. Her perfume, her clothes. All right, Ciri said, clenching her fists. What do you need from me? A letter first. Then we'll retrieve some of Cordelia's belongings from your estate. Can you do that? Ciri thought about all the years she'd spent watching Cordelia perform affection while plotting her death. Yes, she said, I can do that. The meeting was arranged for twilight at an inn on the city's outskirts. Ciri dressed in Cordelia's clothes with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. The perfume was worse, cloying and floral, and so distinctly Cordelia that her stomach turned. But she endured it. Roman's men were positioned throughout the building. Roman explained the layout in low tones as he positioned her behind an ornate carved screen. He'll enter from the other side. The screen will let him see your shape but not clear details. The incense should cover scent inconsistencies. His hand found her shoulder, squeezed gently. You don't have to speak unless you want to. Let him talk. Your voice will sound different from Cordelia's, but he'll believe what he wants to believe. Then he was gone, leaving Ciri alone behind the screen with nothing but her rage and Cordelia's perfume. And then footsteps in the hallway, quick and eager. Cordelia? Fergus's voice desperate. Is it really you? Ciri said nothing. Thank the gods, Fergus breathed. I didn't think you'd actually come. But we can fix this. We can still have everything we planned. Ciri's gone. The marriage can be dissolved, and we can finally be together. He pressed closer to the screen. Ciri stepped back, maintaining distance. Your mother was right, Fergus said. It was always going to work. Marry the human, inherit the fortune, and then... He stopped, caught himself. I know you hated that I had to touch her, but it was necessary. Ciri's nails bit into her palms. The poison was genius, really, Fergus continued. Slow enough that no one suspected, as Ariadne said. He stopped. Why aren't you saying anything? Cordelia, talk to me. Ciri considered maintaining the silence, but she wanted him to know. Tell me about the poison, she said quietly, pitching her voice higher, adding breathiness. What? You know about the poison. Your mother gave it to me. 3 drops every evening in her tea. He laughed bitterly. She said it had to be slow, had to look natural. Said if anyone found out, we'd all hang for murder. But now we can finally... Finally what? Ciri interrupted, dropping the pretense entirely. Finally celebrate my death? Fergus went completely silent for a minute. That's not... Who are you? He asked. You know who? Ciri said flatly. The door opened. Roman's presence filled the space, flanked by guards. Fergus's confusion turned to recognition, then shock. "Your Majesty?" Ciri heard him drop to his knees. "Your Majesty, please, there's been a misunderstanding." "Be silent," Roman commanded quietly. Fergus fell silent immediately. "Fergus of House Brennan," Roman continued, "you stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud in marriage, and treasonous intent against a citizen under the Crown's protection." "Your Majesty, please, I only did what I was told." "You admitted administering poison," Roman interrupted. "You admitted knowledge of intent to murder Lady Cyrilla. I heard every word." Ciri stepped out from behind the screen, still wrapped in Cordelia's perfume. "But," Fergus protested, "Your Majesty, she's nobody, a human. Why would the Alpha King himself intervene for—" "Careful," Roman warned dangerously. "Be very careful how you finish that sentence." Fergus fell silent. "You stand accused of conspiring to murder my mate," Roman stated, each word precise. "Did you truly think there would be no consequences?" Ciri heard Fergus gasp. "Your mate?" he whispered. "But she can't be—" "And yet she is," Roman confirmed coldly. "Please," Fergus whispered. "Your Majesty, I'll testify against Ariadne. I'll tell you everything." "You'll testify regardless," Roman said flatly. "The only question is whether you do so as a cooperative witness or as a condemned conspirator." "But first," he continued, "your marriage to Lady Cyrilla is hereby annulled, effective immediately, on the following grounds. It was unconsummated, entered under fraudulent pretenses, and conflicts with a prior claim recognized by bond and protected under Crown law." Roman's voice took on an edge that made even Ciri shiver with something like pleasure. The shock of it kept her quiet. "You are nothing to her anymore," Roman said. "Your claim to her fortune is void. Your claim to her name is void. And should you ever speak her name again without permission, I will personally ensure you regret it. Am I understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Fergus whispered. "Get him out of my sight." The guards hauled Fergus away, his protests reduced to whimpers. Silence filled the room. They returned to the palace in silence. Sleep wouldn't come. Ciri lay there in the dark until she heard something that made her go very still. Soft footsteps, too soft to be human, the quiet scratch of claws against stone. Then a presence in her room, large and warm. Ciri pushed herself up. "Hello?" she whispered. A soft huff of breath answered her. Close, near the foot of her bed. She reached out tentatively, her hand finding thick fur and solid muscle. A wolf. The creature didn't pull away, just stood there, radiating heat. "You shouldn't be here," Ciri murmured, though she didn't pull her hand back. "Someone will think you're dangerous." Another soft huff, almost amused. Ciri's fingers scratched gently behind one ear. The wolf leaned into the touch slightly, then moved away, settling onto the floor beside her bed. "I don't know if you can understand me," Ciri said quietly, "but I'm going to talk anyway because I can't sleep." The wolf shifted but didn't leave. "I thought revenge would feel different. I thought destroying Fergus would make me feel powerful. But it just felt hollow." Her fingers curled tighter in the wolf's fur. Tears burned behind her eyes but didn't fall. "And I hate that I didn't believe Oz when he tried to warn me. I hate that he died thinking I'd chosen them over him." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how to trust people anymore. I don't know how to let someone be good to me." Her voice broke. The wolf made a soft sound, pressing closer to the bed, its warmth seeping into her. Ciri's hand stayed tangled in its fur, holding on like it was the only solid thing in a world that kept tilting beneath her feet. Chapter 6. A week later, Roman rode beside Ciri, close enough that she could hear the creak of his saddle. 6 guards and servants followed at a respectful distance. "Your sister needs to believe I'm coming to help her," Roman reminded her. Ciri turned her face toward his voice, grim satisfaction settling in her chest. "She will," she said. "Cordelia thinks writing directly to the Alpha King shows she has nothing to hide. She always thought herself very clever when she's, in fact, quite transparent." "Right," Roman said. "You think your sister will be positioning herself as a victim caught between her mother's schemes and her mate's poor judgment? And you're going to let her think it's working," Ciri said. "Until she talks herself into a confession," Roman agreed. Ciri's hands tightened on the reins. They reached the estate by early afternoon. Roman helped Ciri dismount. She could see shapes again, but nothing very clear.
Your Majesty,
a male voice called out, breathless.
we weren't expecting... I came as soon as I received her letter,
Roman interrupted smoothly. Where is Lady Cordelia now? In the East Sitting Room, Your Majesty.
Take me to her,
Roman commanded. But before they moved toward the house, Roman's hand found Ciri's elbow, guiding her slightly away. This is going to feel strange, he warned, but it's necessary. Stay still. Roman moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then his hand came up to cup the back of her neck, his thumb brushing against the pulse point just below her ear. He was scent-marking her, pressing his own scent into her skin until it overwhelmed her natural human smell. Strategic? Functional? But it didn't feel like nothing when his other hand settled at her waist. There, Roman murmured. That should be sufficient. He stepped back, and Ciri found herself pulling in a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Inside the estate, Roman's presence commanded immediate deference. Within minutes, the building had been cleared of unnecessary personnel. Ciri remained with the guards, dressed in simple traveling clothes that could pass for a servant's attire. She positioned herself near the doorway of the East Sitting Room, her face carefully neutral, her posture deferential. Just another attendant in the Alpha King's retinue. Nothing worth noticing. Cordelia swept into the room moments later, and Ciri felt her hands clench involuntarily. Your Majesty, Cordelia breathed. Thank you for coming.
Sit down, Lady Cordelia,
Roman said. She obeyed, settling into the chair with practiced care. Not that Ciri could see much, but it seemed like suddenly Cordelia was tilting her head at an angle that caught the light. She used to look at Fergus that way. Ciri wanted to be sick. I received your letter, Roman continued. You asked for an audience to discuss what you called misunderstandings regarding your mate.
Yes, Your Majesty,
Cordelia said earnestly. Fergus never meant to hurt anyone. Ciri's nails bit into her palms. Is that so? Roman said flatly.
Yes, Your Majesty,
Cordelia insisted, her voice breaking slightly.
Fergus and I are mates. We couldn't help the bond between us. That's not a crime, is it?
She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. We were going to tell Ciri eventually, dissolve the marriage properly. But Mother kept saying to wait, Cordelia murmured. Why did Fergus marry your sister at all? Roman prompted. Since you two were mates? Cordelia's breath caught, as though she hadn't been expecting such a simple question. She probably hadn't Ciri fought, the fool that she was. Mother insisted, Cordelia said quietly. She said with poor Ciri being sick, Fergus should give her a little bit of happiness before she passed. I agreed to it, for I loved my sister so.
Liar, Ciri thought furiously.
Loved? Roman asked. You assume Ciri is dead? Again, Cordelia's breath hitched.
No,
she said, uncertain. Just, she was very ill.
Yes, about that.
Roman paused.
Your fiancé didn't happen to mention putting anything in her tea, did you? Anything your mother may have given him?
Cordelia went very still.
Not at all, she whispered. I swear, Your Majesty, I didn't...
So you weren't aware, Roman interrupted, that Fergus, per your mother's orders, were poisoning Ciri? Cordelia gasped audibly.
No, I didn't... I mean, Fergus wouldn't...
Then why? Roman asked. Do you smell so afraid? And why did Fergus confess to the crime itself? Cordelia jumped to her feet.
He didn't, she exclaimed. He's been writing to me. He would have told me.
He wrote what I told him to, Roman said. Cordelia kept quiet for a minute then, calculating the implication. What was I supposed to do? She whispered eventually. Mother said it was too late to stop. So you admit, Roman said slowly, precisely, that you knew Ciri was being poisoned.
I couldn't prevent it,
Cordelia protested. Mother is terrifying when she wants something. She made it clear there would be consequences if I didn't cooperate. I was afraid. What I understand, Roman said coldly, is that you were complicit in the attempted murder of your own sister for financial gain.
No,
Cordelia said sharply, taking a step toward him.
I'm a victim here too.
She moved closer.
Your Majesty,
Cordelia said, her voice dropping into something intimate. Surely we can come to some kind of understanding? She took another step closer.
Ciri felt something hot and vicious coil in her chest. "If you were to help me," Cordelia murmured, close enough now that her skirts nearly brushed against Roman's legs. "Help, Fergus. Show us mercy. I could make it very much worth your while." She reached up, her fingers moving toward Roman's chest. Something inside Ciri snapped. She stepped forward from her position by the door, shoving aside the other attendants. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Cordelia spun around. Ciri couldn't see her expression, but her silence hinted at shocked. "Ciri?" Cordelia finally breathed. "But I've been here the entire time," Ciri said, "listening to every lie that fell from your mouth." "You brought her," Cordelia said to Roman. "You were never going to help me." "No," Roman confirmed simply. "I wasn't." "She's lying, Your Majesty," Cordelia said desperately. "Whatever she told you." "Stop," Ciri interrupted, her voice cold. "I heard you admit it. You knew about the poison." "I never wanted you to die," Cordelia protested, her voice shrill. "Just Fergus, and the money that is my due." "You deserved nothing," Ciri cut her off. "You stood by and watched while your mother poisoned me for months." She took a step closer, and Cordelia flinched backward. "And just now, you had the audacity to try to seduce Roman to get away with it? To offer yourself to the Alpha King like your beauty is enough to make him overlook attempted murder?" Cordelia screeched, furious. "She's nothing," Cordelia spat, turning back to Roman. "A human. Why are you even listening to her?" "She is my mate," Roman said, and the words fell like thunder. Cordelia stopped mid-sentence. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me." Roman gestured to the guards. "Take Lady Cordelia into custody. She's to be held pending formal judgment at the palace." Cordelia was led away, her protests fading. Ciri stood very still and waited for the satisfaction to come. Instead, she felt only emptiness. "Are you all right?" Roman asked quietly. Ciri shook her head slowly. "I thought it would feel different, watching her break." Roman moved closer. "Revenge rarely feels the way we expect it to," he said. They rode back to the palace as the sun began its descent. When Ciri woke in her bed sometime later, there was the sound of soft footsteps in her room. Not human footsteps, too soft. "Hello," she whispered. A soft huff of breath answered her. The wolf. The same one that had come to her before. Her vision had improved enough that she could make out shapes now, even in low light. "You keep coming back," Ciri murmured. "Why do you keep coming back?" The wolf pressed closer to the bed, its warmth seeping into her. Ciri let her eyes close and allowed herself to drift back toward sleep. Morning came with light that had clarity to it. Shapes held their edges. Colors announced themselves with confidence instead of hiding behind the haze that had plagued her vision for months. Ciri sat up slowly, her heart pounding. The room she'd been living in for days but had only perceived as a collection of shapes and shadows was suddenly real. Concrete. She could see. Her sigh had returned. And when she turned her head, Roman sat in the chair near the window, positioned at that careful distance he always seemed to maintain. For the first time since she'd stumbled into his carriage, Ciri could actually see him. He was devastating to look at in the soft morning light, because of course the man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone in her life would also be beautiful. His features were strong, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble. And his eyes. The same blue she'd seen in the wolf, the same color that had watched her from the foot of her bed, keeping vigil in the darkness. The realization crashed through her with absolute certainty. Every confession she'd made, every time she'd reached out in the dark. It had been him, all of it, always. The man sitting across from her now, watching her. "Your vision has improved," Roman observed quietly. "Yes," Ciri managed, her throat suddenly dry. "I'm glad," Roman said simply. Then Roman left, closing the door quietly behind him, and Ciri was alone with the morning light, her heart beating too fast. Chapter 7. The summons came 3 days after Cordelia's arrest. A servant found Ciri in the library with a message that the Alpha King requested her presence immediately. Roman met her outside the council chamber, his expression grim. Her vision had continued improving, clear enough now that she could read the tension in his shoulders. "What's happened?" Ciri asked. "Ariadne has demanded an audience before the council," Roman said quietly. She's claiming Cordelia was unjustly arrested. She's brought supporters, nobles who owe her favors or fear her influence. Ciri's hands clenched. She's trying to free her. She's trying to create enough doubt that the council pressures me to release Cordelia pending trial, Roman corrected, which would give them time to flee or destroy evidence. He paused. I want you to witness this. There's a screened gallery where you can hear and see everything without being visible. I need you to understand what we're facing, what Ariadne is capable of when she's cornered. The gallery was a narrow space separated from the council chamber by an ornate wooden screen. Ciri positioned herself where she could see the entire chamber. Roman sat at the head of a massive table, surrounded by perhaps a dozen nobles whose influence showed in their bearing and dress. And at the far end, standing rather than sitting, was Ariadne. Her stepmother looked exactly as she remembered, elegant and composed, with carefully arranged dark hair and an expensive but somber dress. Everything about her presentation said grieving mother. Everything about her presentation was a lie. Your Majesty, Ariadne said, her voice carrying respectful deference, I thank you for granting me this audience. You claim your daughter was unjustly arrested, Roman said, his tone giving nothing away. On what grounds? On the grounds that whatever confession you obtained was given under duress, Your Majesty, said Ariadne. My daughter is young, desperately in love with a man who has been imprisoned. When you offered her hope of seeing him again, she would have said anything you wanted to hear. Murmurs rippled around the table. Several nobles exchanged thoughtful glances. Lady Cordelia confessed to having knowledge of a conspiracy to poison her sister, Roman stated clearly. She admitted to knowing Lady Cyrilla was being poisoned and doing nothing to prevent it. With respect, Your Majesty, an older gray-haired noble interjected. A young woman frightened for her mate's life might say anything she thought would please you. The question is whether her words reflect truth or desperation. Ciri's nails bit into her palms. This was exactly what Ariadne wanted. Doubt introduced, the clear line between guilt and innocence deliberately blurred. My daughter loved her sister, Ariadne continued, her voice breaking slightly. They grew up together, shared a home. Yes, there were tensions. What sisters don't have disagreements? But the idea that Cordelia would knowingly allow Cyrilla to be harmed is absurd. The lie fell from her lips as easily as breathing. Ciri wanted to scream. Lady Ariadne? A younger female noble said. You cared for Lady Cyrilla during her illness. Can you speak to the nature of that illness? Of course, Ariadne replied, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. Cyrilla fell ill approximately 8 months ago. We consulted the best healers, tried every treatment. Nothing helped. It was devastating to watch her decline, lose her sight, her strength. I stayed by her bedside night after night, hoping for improvement that never came. Sympathetic murmurs circled the table. Ciri felt bile rise in her throat. Ariadne had stayed by her bedside to make sure the poison was administered consistently. And you had no knowledge of poison being involved? The female noble pressed. None whatsoever, Ariadne said firmly. The first I heard of such an accusation was when my daughter was arrested. I was shocked, horrified. The idea that I would harm Cyrilla? Her voice broke perfectly. She was my husband's daughter, my responsibility. I loved her as if she were my own. Your Majesty, the gray-haired noble said. This is a serious accusation, based largely on the word of a young woman who was emotionally compromised. Lady Ariadne is a respected member of the nobility. Her family has served the crown for generations. To hold her daughter without more concrete evidence seems premature. Other nobles nodded agreement. Lady Cordelia admitted to knowledge and complicity, Roman repeated, his voice hardening. That is grounds for detention pending formal judgment. But is it grounds for holding her indefinitely without trial? Another noble asked. Particularly when the alleged victim has not come forward to press charges herself? Where is Lady Cyrilla, Your Majesty? Why has she not addressed this council? The question hung in the air. Ariadne's expression shifted. Ciri caught the flash of calculation behind the maternal concern. I, too, would like to know where my stepdaughter is, Ariadne said softly. I've been told she's alive, that she's recovered. But I haven't been permitted to see her, to hear from her own lips what she believes happened. If Cyrilla truly thinks I poisoned her, why hasn't she come forward? The implication was clear. If Ciri wasn't willing to face Ariadne directly, perhaps the accusations weren't solid. Fury burned through Ciri like wildfire. How dare she? Your Majesty, the gray-haired noble said, his tone taking gentle pressure. I understand your desire to protect Lady Cyrilla. But holding Lady Cordelia without allowing her mother to see her, without bringing formal charges, without permitting Lady Cyrilla to address the council herself, it begins to look less like justice and more like... He stopped, leaving the implication unspoken. Abuse of power. I would urge you to consider releasing Lady Cordelia pending a formal investigation, another noble added, with appropriate restrictions, of course, confined to her family's estate, but holding her in the palace cells seems excessive. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Ciri watched Roman's jaw tighten as he weighed his options. He could refuse. He was the king. But doing so would create political tensions. And Ariadne knew it. Ciri could see the satisfaction in her stepmother's face, carefully hidden but there. This was what Ariadne did. This was how she'd gotten away with poisoning 2 people. She manipulated. Ciri's vision started to blur, not from her compromised sight, but from sheer rage. Her hands clenched tighter, and then the world tilted. Not again, not now, she thought. But the vision came anyway, relentless and unavoidable. Darkness surrounded her. Not comfortable darkness, but the oppressive darkness of a space with no windows, no light, no hope. A room, small, cold, stone walls weeping with moisture. And in the corner, huddled against the wall with his knees drawn to his chest, Oz, her little brother, alive. Chapter 8. Explain the vision again, Roman said, his voice quiet but commanding. Every detail you can remember. They were in his private study, a map of the Northern Territories spread across the desk between them. Ciri had stopped shaking sometime in the past hour. The room was small, Ciri said, closing her eye. Stone walls, cold, damp. I could see moisture on the stones. There was a window high up near the ceiling, too small to climb through. The door had 3 locks. 3 locks suggests they're expecting him to try to escape, Roman murmured, making notes. What else? A tray pushed through a slot at the bottom of the door. Guards changing shifts. I heard their voices but didn't see them clearly. And... She stopped, her throat tightening. He was counting days, scratching marks into the stone with broken pottery. Roman's jaw tightened. How many marks? Too many, Ciri whispered. Months' worth. A knock at the door interrupted them. Your Majesty, we've confirmed ownership of 3 properties in the Northern Territories registered to Lady Ariadne's family. 2 are actively occupied. 1, a hunting lodge approximately 40 miles north, has been reported empty for the past year, but our sources indicate regular supply deliveries despite the supposed vacancy. Roman's eyes met Ciri's. That's where he is, Ciri said with absolute certainty. I know it. We leave within the hour, Roman said, already moving toward the door. They rode hard, covering the 40 miles in just under 4 hours with frequent changes of horses. The hunting lodge materialized out of the forest like something from a nightmare. Roman deployed his guards with silent efficiency, surrounding the building before anyone inside could realize they were there. The door opened before Roman could knock. A man stepped out, rough-looking, armed, but not expecting the Alpha King and a full contingent of royal guards. His eyes went wide. Your Majesty? He stammered. We weren't, that is, Lady Ariadne didn't mention. You're holding a child prisoner, Roman said, the brother of my mate. You have exactly 1 chance to surrender peacefully and tell me where he is. Choose wisely. The guard's gaze darted between Roman's face and the armed men surrounding the lodge. Basement, he said quickly. Ciri followed Roman through the kitchen, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear anything else. Down narrow stone steps. Into a basement that smelled of damp and neglect, and something else that made her stomach turn. At the end of a short corridor, a door with 3 locks, just like the vision had shown her. The guard's hands shook as he worked the locks. And huddled in the corner, his face turning toward the sudden light with an expression of fear and desperate hope, Oz, Ciri breathed. Her brother stared at her for a heartbeat. "Ciri?" His voice cracked on her name. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Ciri was moving before he hit the ground, crossing the space between them and catching him, pulling him against her chest as sobs tore through both of them. Chapter 9. I want her dead. Ciri spoke the words quietly, watching Oz sleep in the infirmary bed. The healers had cleaned him up, fed him broth and bread, wrapped him in warm blankets. Roman stood beside her, his presence solid and steady. "I know," he said simply. "I want to watch her die," Ciri continued, her voice hardening. "I want her to know it was me. I want—" "Revenge," Roman finished quietly. "Justice," Ciri corrected sharply. "There's a difference," Roman said, "and you need to decide which one you actually want." Ciri turned to look at him, fury blazing in her chest. "She poisoned me. She murdered my father. I know she did, even if I can't prove it. She imprisoned a child. She deserves to die." "She does," Roman agreed, his tone calm. "But killing her won't set you free. It won't heal what she broke." "I don't care," Ciri said, though something in her voice wavered. "Yes, you do," Roman countered gently, "because if you didn't, you would have already asked me to execute her." Ciri's hands clenched into fists. "Then what am I supposed to do? Let her live?" "You bring her to justice," Roman said, "publicly, legally, and then you let her rot in a cell for the rest of her miserable life, knowing she lost everything to the stepdaughter she tried to murder." He moved closer, his golden eyes holding hers. "Death is mercy, Ciri. It's quick. It's final. Living with the consequences of what she's done, that's the real punishment." Ciri wanted to argue, but something in Roman's words rang true despite her fury. "Fine," she said finally. "We do it your way. But I want to be there. I want to watch." "I wouldn't dream of excluding you," Roman promised. With Oz's testimony, everything fell into place with brutal efficiency. The 13-year-old boy told the council everything, how he'd started feeling sick the same way Ciri had, how Ariadne had brought him soup and tea with the same false gentleness, how Ariadne had announced his death to the household even though he was still breathing, how they'd moved him in the night to the hunting lodge, locked him in the basement, told him no one was coming because no one cared. The council listened in horrified silence. The evidence was overwhelming. Fergus's confession, Cordelia's admission, Oz's testimony, the hunting lodge itself, which Roman's men had searched before burning. There was no defense, no room for doubt. Ariadne was arrested at sunset. She struggled, screaming threats and curses as they dragged her toward the doors. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "Do you hear me? I'll make you suffer. Both of you will pay." Ciri stood perfectly still, watching the space where Ariadne had been, and waited for something to happen inside her chest. Waited for the triumph to come, the satisfaction, the sense of completion she'd been chasing since the moment she'd fled into the rain. Nothing came. Chapter 10. 3 days after Ariadne's arrest, Ciri still felt nothing. She went through the motions of living with mechanical precision. Visited Oz in the infirmary, smiled when he smiled. On the 4th day, she was walking through the palace gardens when the vision hit. No warning. One moment she was watching fountain water catch afternoon light, and the next she wasn't in the garden anymore. She saw Roman reaching for something, a glass. Then his face changed, confusion, shock, pain. His hand clutched at his chest. The glass shattered against the floor. "Roman!" Ciri tried to scream, but she had no voice here. The vision shattered. Ciri came back to herself, gasping. She found Roman in the corridor outside the council chambers, dressed formally and clearly preparing to leave for his meeting. "Don't go," she said, the words coming out more forcefully than she'd intended. Roman turned, his expression shifting immediately to concern. "What's wrong, He stopped himself. "What's wrong, Ciri?" "Don't go to the meeting," Ciri repeated. "Something's wrong. I had a vision. You were attacked." Roman's eyes sharpened. "When? Where?" "I'm not sure." Her voice broke. "Soon. Cancel the meeting. Stay here where I know you're safe." Instead of arguing, he turned to the nearest guard. "Send word that the council meeting is postponed," he ordered. "Dispatch search teams throughout the castle." The guard hurried off. Roman's hand found Ciri's elbow, his touch warm and grounding. "Come with me."
he said quietly. We'll wait in my chambers until we know what we're dealing with. Guards were positioned outside. Still, Ciri paced the length of the sitting room, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their shaking. Oz is with the healers, Roman said. He's as safe as we can make him. Ciri nodded but didn't stop pacing. This is my fault, she said finally, the words bitter. I should have killed her when I had the chance. She saw Roman flinch slightly. Ciri, don't, she cut him off sharply. She swore she'd make us pay, and I let her live, and now... Her voice broke. Roman moved closer, his hand extending toward hers. Ciri pulled away before he could make contact, something vicious twisting in her chest at the hurt that flickered across his face. Don't, she repeated, quieter but no less cutting. Don't try to comfort me about being weak. You're not weak, Roman interrupted, and for the first time since she'd known him, there was an edge to his voice. And second-guessing decisions you made for sound reasons won't change anything. Sound reasons? Ciri laughed. You mean your reasons? Ciri, Roman said, definitely anger coloring his tone. Stop punishing yourself. Stop punishing me for trying to help you make a choice you could live with. I'm not punishing you, Ciri shot back. I'm being realistic. She's going to kill you. The vision showed me. And it's going to be my fault because I listened to you instead of trusting my own instincts. Your instincts, Roman repeated, and something in his voice made her actually look at him. He looked tired, worn down in a way she'd never seen before. My instincts told me you were my mate, Roman continued, that you needed time and space and patience, that if I just waited, if I just gave you what you needed, eventually you'd... He stopped, shook his head. I'd what? Ciri said, her heart beating wildly. That I'd let you claim me? When I made it clear it's not what I want? Isn't it? Roman challenged. You've been pushing me away for days. I've watched you shut down, watched you build walls so high I can't reach you anymore. He poured wine into one of the glasses, the deep red liquid catching the late afternoon light. Ciri said nothing as he brought it to his lips. And then remembered the vision. Don't, she tried, but he'd already swallowed. For one terrible heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Roman's expression changed. Confusion flickered across his features, followed immediately by pain. The glass slipped from his fingers. Roman, Ciri screamed. His knees buckled. Ciri lunged forward, catching him before he hit the ground. The vision, the poisoned wine, the death she'd seen. No, she gasped, her voice breaking on the word. Roman, stay with me. Look at me. This was real. This was happening. He was dying right here in her lap, and she'd caused it by trying to prevent it. The vision hadn't been a warning. It had been inevitable. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Roman's hand twitched like he was trying to reach for her. Please, Ciri begged. Please don't do this. Don't leave me. I need you. His breathing was getting shallower. She could see it, could feel it in the way his chest barely moved against her arms. She'd been such a fool. I love you, she said, the words tearing out of her. Do you hear me? Roman's eyes drew shut. You were right, Ciri continued desperately. About everything. You were right and I was wrong and I'm sorry. She pressed her forehead against his. I lost everything once, she whispered. My father, my home, Oz, everyone I trusted. I put myself back together piece by piece and told myself I'd never let anyone close enough to break me like that again. But losing you, Ciri's voice cracked, losing you would destroy me. She could feel his heartbeat under her palm, fading. You're everything to me, she said desperately. Do you understand? Everything. A sob tore through her. Guards! She screamed, her voice raw. Someone help! Guards! The door burst open. Armed men flooded in, followed immediately by the head healer. Poison, she confirmed, her voice grim. She looked up at Ciri, her expression grave. We can purge some of it, but the question is whether his body can withstand the fight long enough. What can I do? Ciri demanded desperately. The mate bond, the healer said. If it were complete, it would help. The bond shares strength, shares life force, gives him an anchor. She stopped, shook her head. An incomplete bond won't be enough, though, not against this. The words penetrated Ciri's panic slowly, like a blade sliding between ribs. The bond. The thing she'd been avoiding, pushing away because she'd been too scared. Not anymore. Then I'm completing it, Ciri said. The healer's eyes widened slightly. You need to claim him, she said quickly. Bite at the junction of neck and shoulder. The bond will know where. But Lady Cirilla, you need to understand. This might not be enough. I don't care, Ciri interrupted, and I have to try. She turned back to Roman, her hands cupping his face. I've been such a fool, she said. I thought I was too broken to love you, but I'm not broken. I'm just scared. Roman's eyes flickered. Ciri, he rasped. No, she interrupted. I love you, and I'm claiming you. She didn't know exactly how this worked, but instinct guided her. She leaned down, pressed her lips to the junction of his neck and shoulder where she could feel his pulse fluttering too fast beneath his skin. Her teeth found the spot and bit down. The bond exploded through her like lightning. Roman gasped, his entire body arcing as the connection locked into place. Ciri felt it snap tight between them, a golden thread that bound soul to soul, life to life, everything she was to everything he was. She could feel his pain, sharp and burning where the poison ate through his system. And underneath it all, she could feel him starting to slip away. No, Ciri said fiercely. You don't get to die. Not now. Roman's hand came up and cupped the back of her neck. All right, he managed, his voice barely a whisper. He pulled her down and bit, clumsy and weak but deliberate, and the bond that had been glowing between them suddenly blazed. Complete. Stay with me, Ciri thought through the bond. I just found the courage to love you. Don't leave me. She felt the moment the bond took hold properly. Felt Roman's body respond to the anchor she was providing. Felt him heal. I will never leave, Roman's thought came back. You are mine. He had her, and she had him. And she would never let go again as she'd finally learned what it meant to be whole. Roman fainted after that. But by the next morning, he was healed. And by the next month, Ciri was queen. And they ruled together, bound by love and the unbreakable thread of fate that had brought a blind girl and a king together on a rain-soaked road and changed everything. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this story. The holiday season has been a quieter time for me on YouTube, with views dropping more than usual. I'm hopeful things will pick up again so I can keep writing and sharing more stories with you. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one. Revenge was at the heart of the story. Do you think it was justified? Did it feel satisfying, or did it leave you conflicted? Let me know in the comments what you thought and what kinds of stories you'd like to hear next. Your feedback truly means a lot to me. Much love, Lily.